Hey folks, Tony Mo here, and today we're going to be sitting down to talk quite extensively about my time with the Heart of Deimos, bringing you my first impressions. I've got about 6+ hours in the new expansion, and all in all, it's been a really good time. So we're going to talk about it today. I've got a few bits of feedback, criticism, but overall, everything I've played thus far has been spectacular. I think, just hands down, I can say this comfortably right off the rip here, this is one of the best expansions, at least early on here, that DE has ever made. I think especially from a presentation perspective, like the actual atmosphere and the little space they've created here with the Heart of Deimos and the Cambion Drift open world is simply on another level. Hopefully this video can help you out if you're an old player looking to maybe make your way back into the game. We're going to break down a lot of the things that are happening here with Deimos. Again, I don't know what your personal experience is like with the game, but I'll at least lay some things out here and speak to some of the things that I think are nice, positive changes or additions to the gameplay experience. Maybe will help you decide whether or not you want to come back for this. If you're a new player who's maybe found your way here because you saw Warframe for the very first time on Steam or advertised somewhere with Heart of Deimos, we're going to be using a lot of Warframe jargon here, but there's a good chance that the footage will at least showcase a little bit of what Warframe is about, and maybe that will be enough to have you dig a little bit deeper. So let's get back on track here. Let's talk a little bit more about that presentation. Like I said, top-notch work here by DE. I think first and foremost, when you make your way to the Cambion Drift and Deimos, the visuals, the lighting, the overall atmosphere is without a doubt the first thing that grabs you. And then, if you're like a lot of the people that I played this game with yesterday, the second thing is the skybox, which is a big part of all of that. This is a skybox that sort of does this full wrap. I think DE's done a really amazing job here in making us feel like the Cambion Drift is the smaller playable area amongst this much larger infested chunk of infestation floating out in space. Because that's what it is, right? It's not something we've really seen DE do before with Valis or with the Plains of Eidolon. Those locations both just have, like, oh, water that runs out in the distance, snowy hills that runs out into the distance. They've never really done a skybox wraparound like this. This feels like something you would find in Destiny because this is the exact sort of thing that Bungie does with Destiny. They have these smaller locations with these big, distant backdrops and incredible skyboxes that really make you feel like you're in a place that is a part of a much larger place. DE has totally done that with the Cambion Drift, and when you jump in an Arcwing and fly up, it doesn't like expose the inner workings, the seams of all of this. It just looks even fucking better. DE, seriously, everybody who was involved with putting all of this together and just the presentation here, woo! It is really something else. They've done an amazing, amazing job here. And it's everywhere. I mean, you see it when you're in the Cambion Drift, the level of detail in the environment, all of the little bits of infestation as you make your way down into the caverns is simply on another level. This play space feels like no other. It is very much a step up from everything they did with Fortuna and Valis, and I can't wait to spend more time here. I've already enjoyed my 6 hours. I love the cave diving stuff. The entire time I was making my way through the introduction alongside of my buddy Derek, we were both just getting super sidetracked. There's so much stuff to shoot and to interact with that will drop resources, that will just explode for the sake of exploding and expose like tendrils and infested veins. It's a wonderfully disgusting, grotesque, and detailed place, and I absolutely adore it. Now, that being said, at times I do think it can be a little bit too detailed. There is something you're going to notice, I think, very early on here when you're engaging in combat. The sort of dense foliage that makes up a lot of the grassy areas of Deimos, of the Cambion Drift, it can be a little bit much when you're engaging in large combat encounters with all of the new infested, some of which who are very large and very wonderful. It does get visually overwhelming. The game runs just as well as I think it runs anywhere else. You're definitely going to see some frame drops when things get really crazy here. But it's not really the frame drops that bother me so much as the combination of the frame drops and, again, the lack of visual clarity. I don't know if that's something that DE can improve upon in the future, but there's a few areas in particular where you're in a dense, grassy environment, and then there's infested architecture structures over the top of you. It starts to feel very claustrophobic because of that lack of visual clarity once the combat really gets rolling. So just a little bit of criticism there, but for the most part, the detail is a welcome thing. There's no doubt about that. Now, speaking of the infested, we've got all these new infested, and we've got these reworked infested, and you put them in an environment where they feel like they really belong, and suddenly the infested feel just like so much more than they ever had before. It's going to be weird to go back to like a traditional derelict map and deal with infested in an infested space station. You know, it's just, I don't think it's going to be the same. I haven't done it yet, and I'm kind of curious if like I'm still going to have this newfound appreciation for like the infested, like as this faction, or if they're going to feel like, oh, that's the old infested, this is the new infested. It's something I'm curious about, but they're so disgustingly well designed and reworked here. We'll talk a little bit more about them in the combat segment because there's actually some combat implications to a lot of the new infested types, but seeing some of these really large infested crawl out of the ground it's really cool, and it gives you a bunch of oh shit moments very early on. And even as we pushed into, you know, like the 6-7 hour mark last night when we were playing, doing some of the bounties, the oh shit factor definitely sticks around. They've done a great job here. And I think that's the thing we really need to talk about as well, is that you have to remember that this location, the Cambion Drift in Deimos, it's not just purely an infested chunk. It is Entradi Orican architecture that has been consumed by infestation. And so you have this combination of these two very different things. We've seen it in other locations before. Obviously, the infested, you know, overwhelming Orican architecture is not a new thing, right? The Void is full of this. We've seen this in the Derelicts and whatnot. But the presentation here just takes it to a whole nother level. The rework of a lot of the Orican architecture, as it's represented for the Entradi family here, is really something special. And with the new lighting, holy crap. I know we've got all these old nodes that used to be the Derelict that now exist around Deimos and the Cambion Drift, and I really hope that at some point they get to go back and rework them to make them look like the stuff we actually find in Deimos and the Cambion Drift, because it is simply spectacular. And then when you throw in the Necromechs and this cast of characters with the Entradi family and Lloyd and Otak, there's a lot of wonderful things happening here that make Deimos right off the rip, from an atmospheric, from a visual presentation, from like this is a place I'm going to spend time in, one of the most unique, cohesive, and alive landscapes DE has ever built. Huge kudos to Digital Extremes, the entire team on this one. They have simply crushed it here. So let's move on and talk a little bit about the introduction portion of Deimos, because I think this is something worth talking about. There is a small piece of story that you're going to play through here in single player before you go into the rest of the game. I'm not going to show footage from it. In fact, I'm going to just be showing like really generic footage for you guys because I don't want to spoil any of this. There's a bunch of really cool stuff in the early hours of this expansion that I would never want to ruin for anyone. So we're going to avoid doing that. Now, to speak on that early story mission, it's not super long, but it's not nearly as short as I expected it to be. And it's really good. It's up there with some of my favorite story missions that I've ever played in Warframe. It does a really good job of, I think, very quickly, but also in a way that doesn't feel rushed, introducing roughly what the hell is going on here with the Entradi family. It also introduces the family itself, which is this wonderfully diverse cast of characters, all with their own situations, right? Their own perspectives on the situation, and also the interactions they have with one another as family members trying to deal with this rather spectacular thing that has happened to them. There's also just a really good and I think well-paced introduction to a lot of the mechanics and gameplay concepts that exist inside of Deimos, like the Necromechs, for example. And again, totally not going to spoil that, but it's really well done, and I think you're going to play through this portion of the introduction here in single player, and you're going to have a smile on your face when you walk away from all of it. So let's move on and talk a little bit about some of the actual gameplay stuff here. Things that have been changed, things that have been added. I think it's important we start by talking briefly about the reworked faction standings. So you have your factions like you would on any other open world location. There are multiples, the main one being the primary Entradi family faction with Mother. The thing that has changed here, though, is now every single member of this family who is tied to a different thing, including conservation, fishing, open world, stuff like just gathering resources, and then bounties through Mother, has their own tokens. These tokens can then be used to gain access to items, blueprints, resources, but they can also then be traded in for standing to Grandmother. You do not directly turn things in anymore for standing. You will not be just turning in raw fish or raw minerals for standing like you did in Valis. Everything is done to give you access to specific tokens. Each member of the family has their own tokens. Again, all of those tokens can be turned in for just straight up rep, but you need to get those items in order to earn those tokens in the first place. Some of the rank ups for the main Entrati family faction standing grind will require tokens from the individual family members. So essentially, you are going to be required to participate in all of the activities to some extent. This is going to be good and bad depending on the type of person you are. Do you like fishing? Do you like mining? Do you like conservation? If the answer to all of those things is no, you absolutely hate that, then you'll probably enjoy this a little bit less than everyone else. I personally really like this stuff, and I think it's really well represented and presented here on the Cambion Drift, so I look forward to it. I also think that for the first time, there's a little bit more to actually unlock behind these individual activities, specifically gaining access to infested versions of Kubros and Kavats, which have their own thing going on with Sun. You know, it's worth doing the conservation. There's a chance to unlock some cool pets there. The fishing has its own thing going on. There's a whole faction for Necromex with Lloyd. I like this. I think this is a good way going forward to deal with faction standing. I think everybody's going to have a different perspective on this, and I think there's always a conversation to be had about whether or not you should be forcing people to engage in certain activities in your game, but I like this so far. It'll be interesting to see how it pans out long term. It's not that dissimilar to what we've done in the past. Again, there's just an additional layer here of refinement, and I think rather than having like so many loose canon pieces of the puzzle for how you might gain faction rep and having all these different things happening that are just not even connected to each other in any other way, you've now got, yes, a lot of different systems, but they all are identical. It's the same concept. As you go from one character to the next, one activity to the next, you understand, especially as a newer player, that you're going to do things for this person and they're going to give you tokens. Those tokens will give you things, or in turn you can trade them in directly for rep. It makes sense, and I think it's a better path forward than what they've done in the past. So that's my thought on it. Let's move on and talk a little bit about bounties and the actual combat experience on the Cambion Drift. Now, the biggest thing about bounties here so far for me is that while we've got a lot of the same sorts of, you know, missions we might find, defense missions, go out, kill this thing, activate this thing type missions, they have been freshened up a little bit. You know, the presentation is a little bit different. Obviously, you're dealing with the infested, but we've also got some entirely new mission types that introduce new characters. There's actually a specific Grenier and Corpus character. They each have their own mission. The Grenier one I found particularly fun because you're actually teaming up alongside of the Grenier and competing with them to see who can kill the most infested. This Grenier is all like, you kill infested, we kill infested. Friends. Like, the idea that, you know, the enemy of my enemy is my enemy, and however that saying goes, right? You know, like, it's just a nice little touch here, and any chance, honestly, for DE to introduce more characters that I might be able to laugh at or that might put a smile on my face is totally a-okay with me. I really appreciate this rework of this, and I think in general the environment that is the Cambion Drift just makes it a lot of fun to do activities on. I enjoy the bounties here because I think the combat experience on the Cambion Drift is better than it is on Valis or Plains, exponentially so. And of course, a big part of that is that we've got this new infested. Now, when you get to higher levels, you're going to start to really recognize the more unique design of some of these new infested. Certain infested enemies are going to have weak spots that actually need to be destroyed in order to expose that enemy to damage further. It's a nice touch, and you don't really see it when you're doing like the 30-40 content, but as you get past 50 up into the 100s, it definitely becomes noticeable, and I just think that a lot of these new infested are a joy to fight, and their overall wow factor when they're on the screen is very, very high. Now, probably my favorite part about the bounties are the new vault runs. So I can't speak to what these are going to be like when we get to like the end game standing stuff. I think it's been made very clear at this point that we're going to be using Necromex to do versions of these vault runs. But the vault runs themselves are super well structured and presented. They are, again, just like some of the reworked bounties here. They're taking old concepts like wave defense and they're combining them with simple puzzles. I think a really great theme and presentation. And also probably one of the best reward rooms in Warframe so far. When you complete a vault run after you've dealt with all the different waves and you've helped Lloyd and Otak gain access to the main puzzle to unlock the vault door, you actually get to go inside that vault and just get a massive floor full of loot. See, Nerys is even excited about it. It's wonderful. You open the door and there's just loot everywhere. It is a glorious moment, and it really does feel properly rewarding. Like, that's the kind of thing you want to see when you're playing a looter shooter. You want to open a room and just be like, look at all the loot we just got. It's really cool. I love the vault runs. They've got like their own separate reward pool. You can just keep running them over and over again. There's also a new endless bounty type that you can just keep going as long as you can possibly stand at. That has a ton of additional rewards. Overall, I'm really happy with the bounties on presentation here. I love the vaults, and I hope that they keep doing more with that. I want the vaults to refresh, you know, every now and then. I want different vaults with different layouts, with slightly different puzzles. This is something, and I know DE isn't exactly famous for taking one idea and really running with it. They usually move on to the next one, but this is one thing I would love to see them expand upon. Just my 2 cents there. And that kind of covers it. There's so much more we could talk about. I love Lloyd and Otak. Otak on their own might end up being too much, but the two of them together makes me smile so very much, and I'm going to record so much of both of their voice lines, and they're totally going to end up on my stream. Deimos itself, the Cambion Drift, there's so many more surprises here to be found. We've already started to uncover things. The community has already started to uncover things like the obelisks. And I can't wait to see what other secrets might lie in wait for us. Honestly, if there aren't that many more, I think just the stuff that was there on the first day was pretty spectacular. I'm really excited to play more of this. And I love a lot of the improvements DE has made to things they've been doing for the last several years now. Huge shout out to everyone over on my Patreon who continues to support this channel and the content I create here. If you guys would like to become patrons and support the channel monetarily, you can do so starting at just $1. That gives you access to the Patreon, where I post updates about the things that I'm doing here on the channel. I'll share screenshots and discussion on games that I'm playing that I will be making videos for on the channel. You can also get access to those videos, ad-free versions of those videos before anyone else does, and you also get access to our private Discord where you can come hang out and talk all things Warframe, Warhammer, hobby stuff, dogs and cats and pets and food and all of that other goodness. Take care of yourselves out there. Be awesome to one another, and I will see you all in the next one.